Hey coin lovers, welcome back to CoinAgeEra. Today I've got a legendary British coin with a story you'll love. The story of the United Kingdom 1 penny of 1947 begins in a world recovering from one of the darkest and most destructive chapters in human history. When the year 1947 arrived, Britain was standing at a crossroads, half drenched in the memories of World War II, half dreaming of a future where the country would rise again, rebuild its industries, and redefine its identity in a rapidly changing world. The 1947 penny was not just a coin meant for everyday trade. It was a symbol forged in the fires of wartime struggle and peacetime hope. The metal it carried, the design it displayed, and the era it represented all merged into a single bronze disc that would silently witness the transformation of Britain from an imperial superpower to a nation learning to stand on its own feet. The portrait of King George VI on the obverse of the coin carries more weight than a simple king's profile. George VI was never meant to be king. His brother, Edward VIII, had abdicated the throne for love, an event that had shaken the foundations of the monarchy. Suddenly, a shy, stammering prince who never expected the crown found himself leading an empire into war. When the 1947 penny was minted, George VI had already guided Britain through 6 years of brutal conflict. His voice had become the voice of courage for millions who listened to his wartime speeches during the Blitz. His face on the penny acted as a reminder of resilience, of a guiding force that stood firm even when bombs fell, cities burned, and families were torn apart. Every 1947 penny bore this legacy, a quiet nod to the king who became the symbol of national unity in a time of chaos. On the reverse of the coin sits Britannia, the female warrior guardian who had represented Britain for centuries. Draped in classical robes, holding a trident and shield, she was the eternal symbol of strength, naval power, and imperial reach. But in 1947, Britannia's meaning was shifting. The empire that had once stretched across continents was beginning to dissolve. India had achieved independence in the very same year this penny was minted. Other colonies were soon to follow. Britannia's image, once a declaration of dominance, now represented nostalgia, a reminder of what Britain once was and what it was slowly leaving behind. Yet she still sat proudly on the coin, her presence telling the people that although times were changing, the spirit of Britain would continue to endure. The material of the 1947 penny is also a chapter of history. Made of 95% bronze, its warm brown color stood for a moment in time when metal resources were still scarce. During the war, bronze, copper, and tin were swallowed up by weapon factories, ammunition plants, shipyards, and communication equipment. Even after the war, shortages persisted, and Britain was struggling financially. The government was borrowing heavily from the United States, rationing food, rationing fuel, and rationing almost every essential product. Against this background, the decision to continue minting bronze pennies was both practical and symbolic. Practical because bronze was durable and long-lasting. Symbolic because it reflected the nation's determination to preserve some sense of continuity amid widespread change. Economically, 1947 was a year of turbulence. Britain was deep in debt, industries were being nationalized, and workers were fighting to rebuild their lives. The penny, the simplest of coins, held enormous value for the everyday citizen. It could buy newspapers, sweets, bus rides, and small necessities that kept daily life functioning. The 1947 penny circulated through post-war markets, bomb-scarred towns, and newly built communities. It passed from soldier to civilian, from factory worker to shopkeeper, from mother to child. Each penny carried traces of the hands it passed through, traces of struggles, hopes, dreams, and sacrifices. Its journey through the pockets of millions made it a silent storyteller of ordinary British life. Meanwhile, the minting of the 1947 penny also reflected the technological landscape of its time. The Royal Mint, still recovering from wartime damage and shortages, operated under limited conditions. Workers had endured bombings, blackout nights, and shortages of skilled labor. Machines that once minted coins for an empire were now producing currency for a nation, trying to stand again. Every coin struck in 1947 required effort, precision, and dedication from workers who had witnessed years of hardship. In this way, the coin represented the resilience of not just a nation, but the very hands that shaped its currency. Furthermore, the 1947 penny marks the later years of pre-decimal coinage, a system that existed for more than 1,000 years. The old British monetary structure, pounds, shillings, pence, was one of the most complex systems in the world. The penny played a central role in this system, acting as the core unit that connected the entire structure. When decimalization finally occurred in 1971, coins like the 1947 penny became relics of a past era. They transitioned from daily tools of trade to collectible treasures. Suddenly, the same coin that once bought a loaf of bread was being preserved in albums, displayed in exhibitions, and studied by numismatists across the world. The rarity factor of the 1947 penny also adds to its charm. While it was not the rarest year of penny minting, many of these coins were lost, damaged, melted down, or worn out over time. The coins that survive today, especially in sharp, detailed condition, are pieces of living history. They maintain the original portrait of George VI, the crisp strokes of Britannia, and the deep chocolate-brown tone of wartime bronze. Collectors adore this coin because it embodies an age of transition, an age when Britain was redefining its identity, its economy, and its place in the world. At the cultural level, the 1947 penny connects to the emotional heart of the British people. It reminds them of gas lamps, red buses, ration books, and post-war optimism. It brings memories of old markets, railway stations, bakeries, traditional Sunday mornings, and the era when families gathered around radios instead of televisions. For many older Britons, finding a 1947 penny in a drawer or attic is like discovering a childhood, memory preserved in metal. For younger generations, the coin is a way to touch the past, an era that textbooks cannot fully capture but a simple penny can. This is the power of the 1947 penny. It is not rare because of limited mintage. It is rare because of what it represents: resilience, transformation, survival, and heritage. A coin born in the ashes of war, carrying symbols of empire, circulating through an exhausted nation, and eventually becoming a timeless collectible. It stands as proof that even the smallest objects can hold the biggest stories. As the 1947 penny circulated through the pockets of millions, Britain was undergoing one of the greatest societal transformations in its history. The war had not only reshaped cities but had reshaped minds. The old class system was softening, new opportunities were emerging, and the hopes of the British public were shifting toward progress and equality. In this changing atmosphere, the penny became a democratic symbol used by all, regardless of wealth or status. From aristocrats buying morning newspapers to factory workers purchasing lunch, the 1947 penny moved freely among every class. It was one of the few objects that connected the elite and the everyday soul, carrying the same value, the same meaning, and the same historical weight. The reconstruction of Britain was an enormous task, and every sector of society contributed in its own way. Railways were being repaired, factories rebuilt, and the scars of bombed neighborhoods slowly healed as families moved into new housing estates. As children played in these fresh surroundings, the penny was often a part of their world, used for small treats, sweets, or saving up for a weekly joy. In many ways, the 1947 penny became a token of post-war innocence returning to the land. It symbolized the restoration of normal life, where simple pleasures mattered again after years of fear and uncertainty. At the same time, the coins themselves were witnessing the rise of the modern British identity. The late 1940s saw the establishment of the National Health Service, one of Britain's proudest achievements. Hospitals were opening their doors to everyone, regardless of income, marking a new chapter of social welfare. People who once struggled for basic medical care were now stepping into hospitals without fear of cost. The 1947 penny circulated through this era of social change, passing from patients buying tea at hospital canteens to nurses collecting bus fares, becoming part of a national transformation. When historians look back, they often speak of the NHS as the dawn of modern Britain, yet coins like the 1947 penny were silently present through these life-changing moments. Another profound shift was the beginning of mass immigration from Commonwealth nations. Ships like the SS Empire Windrush soon brought thousands of people from the Caribbean, South Asia, and Africa who would go on to shape modern British culture in music, food, language, industry, and everyday life. When new immigrants earned their first British coins, the 1947 penny was often among their earliest earnings. This tiny bronze disc thus became an ambassador, welcoming new communities to Britain. It connected newcomers to local markets, buses, neighborhoods, and routines of daily life. It carried the fingerprints and cultural blend of a nation evolving into the multicultural Britain that exists today. But while society was moving forward, the British Empire was crumbling. The year 1947 marked the independence of India and Pakistan, powerful events that shook the global balance. This was the beginning of the end of empire. For generations, Britannia on the penny had symbolized domination and naval power. But in 1947, her presence carried a new meaning, a reminder of a political world that was fading, as colonies sought freedom and self-governance. The penny circulated at the intersection of old imperial pride and the rising wave of decolonization. It was a relic of the empire and a witness to its dismantling. The 1947 penny also intersected with Britain's scientific and technological ambitions. While the country struggled financially, British scientists were contributing groundbreaking innovations, from early computer technology to the first steps in nuclear research. Universities and laboratories were buzzing with ideas, and the foundation for future breakthroughs was being laid. Students, researchers, and scientists who grabbed a cup of tea from the campus cafe or paid for bus rides with pennies were unknowingly connecting the everyday economy to the remarkable discoveries of the future. The penny, once again, played its subtle role circulating among minds that would reshape global science. Beyond science, the late 1940s were also rich with cultural revival. The war had silenced theaters, music halls, and cinemas. But by 1947, Britain's cultural stage was alive again. Films were being produced, concerts held, radio broadcasts thriving, and literature taking bold new turns. The penny was often present in this cultural awakening, whether paying for cinema tickets, newspapers carrying new literary works, or radio licenses that gave families access to programs and speeches. The entertainment that shaped British imagination was, in some humble way, supported by the trillions of small transactions made with coins like the 1947 penny. This period also marked changes in fashion, lifestyle, and gender roles. During the war, women had taken up jobs traditionally held by men. After the war, many fought to keep their place in the workforce. Society's view of women was evolving, and the 1947 penny traveled through the hands of millions of working women teachers, nurses, shopkeepers, machinists, and clerical workers who were building new futures for themselves and their families. The coin held the energy of a society slowly embracing gender equality, a shift that would eventually revolutionize British workplaces. In the streets, the penny flowed through a world full of contrast. There were still bombed-out ruins in many cities, yet new shops were opening. Poverty was widespread, yet hopes were higher than ever. Britain was struggling but dreaming. People were exhausted yet determined. The penny moved through this emotional landscape effortlessly, touching every aspect of life from hardship to hope, from uncertainty to rebuilding, from destruction to renewal. Even outside Britain, the 1947 penny had significance. British soldiers and citizens stationed abroad often carried these coins with them. Some gave them as gifts, some used them for trade on foreign bases, and some kept them as reminders of home. The penny traveled across continents from Europe to Asia to Africa, marking the journeys of people in a world still healing from war. For numismatists today, The charm of the 1947 penny lies not in its monetary rarity, but in its historical density. Each surviving coin is a condensed time capsule filled with stories, economic struggles, social transformations, political shifts, cultural rebirth, scientific ambition, and the emotional lives of everyday people. Holding a 1947 penny is like holding a piece of Britain at one of its most dramatic turning points. As the 1947 penny continued its journey through Britain's recovering society, it became a witness to something deeper than economic transactions. It observed the emotional rebuilding of a nation. After years of loss, separation, and grief, families were finally being reunited. Soldiers who had spent long years in distant lands returned home to wives, children, and parents. Many had left when their children were infants and now returned to find them walking, talking, and growing. The simple act of handing a child a penny to buy sweets was, for many returning fathers, a moment filled with indescribable warmth. The 1947 penny, passed from parent to child, often carried the unspoken joy of healing a family broken by war. In the streets of London, the revival of markets became a symbol of national resilience. The bustling sound of vendors calling out prices, the cheerful noise of children running between stalls, and the aromatic smell of fresh produce created a new sense of normalcy. The 1 penny was one of the most common coins exchanged in these markets, especially in places like Covent Garden, Billingsgate, and borough markets around major cities. Whether purchasing fresh fish, vegetables, or homemade pastries, the penny played a central role in the heartbeat of London's everyday life. Each coin in circulation carried the energy of these markets restored, vibrant and hopeful. Beyond the marketplaces, the 1947 penny was part of an important transformation in communication and media. Newspapers were still the primary source of information, and radio was the dominant medium connecting homes across the country. People spent pennies each morning to buy newspapers filled with headlines about politics, reconstruction, and the new world emerging after war. The same penny might later pay for batteries that powered the family radio, a device that brought music, news, and comforting voices into living rooms still haunted by wartime silence. When families sat together listening to the BBC, the coins used for that entertainment unknowingly helped stitch together the emotional fabric of a healing nation. At an even more intimate level, the 1947 penny was part of the personal rituals of daily British life. Tea, that timeless center of British culture, was often purchased by the ounce in small corner shops, many of which survived the war despite shortages and rationing. Customers frequently handed over pennies for tea leaves, sugar rations, or small treats. In this way, the 1947 penny became woven into one of the most iconic British traditions, the comfort of tea time, shared by families longing for peace and warmth. Meanwhile, Britain's industrial world was slowly rising again. Factories that once produced war materials were now manufacturing household goods, automobiles, and machinery. The penny circulated heavily among factory workers, men and women who spent long shifts producing the essential products that would fuel Britain's future economy. Workers used pennies for bus rides, work canteen meals, evening newspapers, and the occasional escape into a local pub. In these pubs, conversations flowed about work, wages, sports, politics, and hopes for a better tomorrow. The penny exchanged in these moments didn't just buy drinks, it helped maintain the social bonds that gave communities strength during uncertain times. In the countryside, the coin moved through a slower, more peaceful environment. Farmers, shepherds, and cottage industries used the penny for everyday necessities, buying tools, feed, or small household supplies. The rural landscape had its own charm, its own rhythm, and its own struggles. Many fields still bore scars from bomb craters, and some villages mourned the loss of entire generations. Yet, in the gentle countryside markets, the 1947 penny was a symbol of stability, proof that life, despite its wounds, was continuing. The coin also found a home in Britain's academic circles. Universities, many of which had been partially disrupted during the war, were once again filling with students. Young men and women eager to shape the future used pennies for bus fares, snacks, and books from secondhand shops. These students would go on to become doctors, teachers, engineers, authors, and scientists. Their influence would shape the next several decades of British society. A penny spent on stationery or a warm drink in a university canteen might have indirectly contributed to the education of someone who would one day impact the world. Meanwhile, the early stages of Britain's welfare state were taking shape. Social housing projects were being constructed to replace the ruins left by war. New families moved into these freshly built homes, modern, modest, and full of optimism. Children played outside, trading marbles or candies often bought for a penny. For these families, the 1947 penny symbolized belonging and a fresh start. It was not a coin of wealth, but a coin of comfort, stability, and new beginnings. At ports and shipping yards, where countless goods entered and left the country, workers handling global trade frequently used pennies in their daily routines. These coins traveled far, often being carried by sailors or dockers visiting other countries. Some 1947 pennies were taken to Europe, Africa, and Asia by sailors, becoming tiny ambassadors of British culture. Today, collectors sometimes find 1947 pennies in unexpected places across the world, each one carrying a silent story of its travels. In British homes, the penny began to take a role as a sentimental artifact. Parents often saved specific pennies for good luck, believing that coins from the year of a child's birth, a wedding, or a meaningful event brought blessings. Many 1947 pennies were kept in drawers, jars, or purses for such sentimental reasons. Some were placed under floorboards as good luck charms during house construction, following ancient British traditions. Some were given to children as keepsakes, with parents telling stories about wartime life and the hardships they had survived. Even as the modern world marched forward, the simple copper-brown coin represented a connection to heritage. The portrait of George VI reminded citizens of a dignified leader who rose unexpectedly to power but guided the nation with steady courage. The Britannia design kept alive centuries of maritime legacy and national pride. The bronze material reflected the nation's determination to endure hardship. Every design element, every curve, every inscription was a reminder of Britain's layered past. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, coins like the 1947 penny were being gradually overshadowed by upcoming designs, changing economic conditions, and discussions about decimalization. Yet the penny continued to circulate as one of the most recognized coins across the kingdom. Children collected them, adults relied on them, and elders cherished them. The 1947 penny became part of personal histories woven into countless stories of love, struggle, sacrifice, and hope. And while the world around it changed rapidly, television entering homes, cars becoming common, music evolving, politics shifting, the penny remained a quiet constant. Its significance did not fade. Instead, it transformed, becoming a piece of living history that carried the soul of an era, long after the era itself had faded into memory. As Britain stepped into the early 1950s, the 1947 penny had already woven itself into the emotional and practical life of millions. But its journey was far from over. The coin remained in constant circulation, carrying with it not only the weight of transactions but the invisible footprints of everyday existence. It traveled through school corridors, church donation plates, train stations, post offices, theaters, and public parks. Each environment added another layer to its story, transforming a simple bronze disc into one of the most expressive symbols of British resilience. One of the places where the penny held a special significance was the educational system. Schools across the country still fixing broken windows, repainting walls, and restoring libraries damaged or emptied during the war were filled with children eager to learn. Many teachers were war veterans or individuals who had lived through the Blitz, and their stories lived quietly in their eyes and voices. When children used pennies to buy pencils, notebooks, or small snacks from school tuck shops, the coins exchanged weren't just currency, they were tokens powering a new generation's education. The future scientists, engineers, authors, musicians, nurses, and leaders of Britain formed their dreams in these classrooms, with pennies often being their first introduction to personal responsibility and financial value. At the same time, homes across Britain were undergoing subtle but powerful transformations. The post-war years saw the rise of household conveniences that had once been luxuries: radios, gas heaters, bicycles, small kitchen appliances, and eventually televisions. As Britain stepped into the early 1950s, the 1947 penny had already woven itself into the emotional and practical life of millions. But its journey was far from over. The coin remained in constant circulation, carrying with it not only the weight of transactions but the invisible footprints of everyday existence. It traveled through school corridors, church donation plates, train stations, post offices, theaters, and public parks. Each environment added another layer to its story, transforming a simple bronze disc into one of the most expressive symbols of British resilience. One of the places where the penny held a special significance was the educational system. Schools across the country still fixing broken windows, repainting walls, and restoring libraries, damaged or emptied during the war, were filled with children eager to learn. Many teachers were war veterans or individuals who had lived through the Blitz, and their stories lived quietly in their eyes and voices. When children used pennies to buy pencils, notebooks, or small snacks from school tuck shops, the coins exchanged weren't just currency. They were tokens powering a new generation's education. The future scientists, engineers, authors, musicians, nurses, and leaders of Britain formed their dreams in these classrooms, with pennies often being their first introduction to personal responsibility and financial value. At the same time, homes across Britain were undergoing subtle but powerful transformations. The post-war years saw the rise of household conveniences that had once been luxuries: radios, gas heaters, bicycles, small kitchen appliances, and eventually televisions. Families saved pennies in jars, tins, and cloth bags, slowly collecting enough to buy something meaningful. Saving pennies became a family ritual in many homes, children adding their pocket money, parents setting aside change from their wages, and grandparents contributing with a proud smile. When a family finally managed to purchase a new item, the achievement was more than financial, it was emotional. The 1947 penny was often part of these savings, silently empowering families to step into modern comfort. In social gatherings, the penny remained an anchor of small pleasures. British pubs, a cornerstone of community life, were lively hubs where workers gathered after long shifts to share stories, laughter, and concerns. A single penny could buy salted peanuts or be tossed into tabletop games, popular in local taverns. These pubs were not mere drinking places. They were sanctuaries where communities rebuilt their emotional strength after years of trauma. Conversations ranged from football to politics, from memories of war to hopes for peace. The penny in circulation there absorbed the echo of every joke, every worry, every whispered dream. Elsewhere, in the quiet corners of small towns, the penny moved through bakeries famous for warm breads, pastry shops selling custard tarts and jam rolls, and family-owned groceries with shelves stacked in organized, comforting chaos. In these cozy establishments, the 1947 penny helped preserve the charm of traditional British life, where customers knew their shopkeepers by name and communities looked out for one another. Even something as simple as buying warm bread for a penny contribution kept alive bonds that markets across centuries had built. The coin also played a surprising role in the blossoming era of British transportation. As the nation modernized its railways, buses, and trams, the 1947 penny became one of the most frequently exchanged coins for fares. From schoolchildren riding to classes, to office workers commuting to the heart of the city, to elderly couples visiting relatives, the penny traveled with them. It witnessed fare collectors clicking their machines, watched passengers reading newspapers or gazing out of foggy windows, and felt the vibrations of trains rushing through landscapes that were healing from their wartime scars. In entertainment, the penny gained a reputation as a gateway to joy. Children used it to enter small funfair rides. Adults spent it on sweet stalls, and couples used it in fortune-telling machines along coastal promenades. For many, the penny was associated with first dates, seaside holidays, and precious memories captured in laughter under the British sun. During summer months, it wasn't uncommon to find pennies scattered on sand, dropped by excited children building castles or families setting down picnic baskets. The coin became part of holiday traditions, simple, magical, and unforgettable. And through all of this, the design of the coin played a quiet but significant role in shaping its identity. The image of King George VI, firm yet calm, reminded citizens of stability and leadership during uncertain times. The inscription Georgievs V, DGBR, OMN, Rex F: D: I'm: Imp, though shortened in various later, minting stood as a reminder of Britain's global influence, even as the empire slowly receded. On the reverse, Britannia continued to represent protection, pride, and continuity. Her trident, shield, and seated posture symbolized strength grounded in history. For many Britons, the image of Britannia was comforting, a visual anchor connecting the present to centuries of national tradition. However, as the decade progressed, new economic pressures began shaping the future of British coinage. Inflation slowly crept in, wages changed, and the value of the penny began to evolve. Although still important, it was no longer the powerful unit of purchasing it had once been. Discussions about replacing the centuries-old coinage system with decimalization became more frequent in political circles. Newspapers published debates, economists wrote columns, and citizens expressed mixed feelings. Many older generations adored the existing system, its familiarity, its connection to tradition, and its unique complexity. Younger generations, however, sought simplicity and modernization. Yet, through all these changes, the 1947 penny stood unaffected in its role. It remained a storyteller, a timekeeper, a silent companion. It was touched by millions of hands across thousands of towns, each pair of fingers adding another invisible chapter to its legacy. Whether spent by a sailor in Portsmouth, a farmer in Wales, a miner in Yorkshire, a shopkeeper in Glasgow, or a student in Cambridge, the coin carried fragments of countless lives. As the late 1950s approached, the 1947 penny had already survived more than a decade of dramatic national transformation. But the biggest shift, the one that would change its destiny forever, was still ahead. The era of decimalization was coming, and with it, the end of Britain's ancient monetary system. The 1947 penny, once an everyday necessity, was about to become a relic of the past, preserved not for its value in trade, but for the history etched into its metal. As the decades advanced, the 1947 penny gradually stepped out of the spotlight, but its legacy only grew stronger. By the late 1960s, Britain was preparing for a monumental transformation, the switch from old, pre-decimal currency to the new decimal system. Millions of bronze pennies circulated for the last time through London markets, railway stations, small bakeries, and fading Victorian-era shops. Among them, some 1947 pennies still carried faint fingerprints of people who had lived through the war, rationing, rebuilding, and the slow rebirth of the nation. When the Royal Mint finally announced the end of the penny's circulation, collectors and historians realized that they were not just losing a coin. They were losing a silent witness to an era that would never return. During the 1970s, coin enthusiasts worldwide began hunting for earlier George VI coins, especially pieces minted in the late 1940s. Among these, the 1947 penny emerged as a cultural time capsule, connecting the post-war struggle, the end of British colonial supremacy, and the transformation of British money itself. The coin grew into a global symbol of endurance, a reminder that nations, like coins, survive by adapting, changing, and moving forward. For many collectors holding a 1947 penny felt like holding the closing chapter of the British Empire in their hands. In the modern age, With digitized currency and tap-to-pay technology dominating daily life, the weight of the 1947 penny becomes even more meaningful. Its bronze surface carries stories of shopkeepers who rebuilt their lives from ruins, of families who trusted every saved penny, of children who were given this coin as their first allowance, and of soldiers returning home searching for hope in a war-torn world. It represents a time when money wasn't just used, it was valued, protected, and deeply respected. Today, this coin stands not as a rare treasure, but as a historical treasure. Its worth is not measured in dollars or pounds, but in emotions, memories, and heritage. The 1947 penny reminds us that even the smallest objects hold the power to preserve the spirit of an entire generation. Whether in a collector's cabinet, an auction display, a dusty attic box, or featured in a YouTube video, its presence continues to spark curiosity, nostalgia, and admiration. And as we close this long journey into the life of the 1947 UK 1 penny, one truth becomes clear. It is not just a coin, it is the heartbeat of a nation's past. A reminder of Britain rising from ashes, a symbol of courage, and a storyteller of a world much different from ours today. If you enjoyed this deep coin history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to CoinAgeEra for more amazing coin stories.